The defense has started its case in the trial again of the three white men charged with killing Ahmaud Arbery. Prosecution wrapped its case with the medical examiner who performed that autopsy. During 8 days of testimony, the prosecutors called 23 witnesses. Ahmaud Arbery's mother says the state presented a strong case and is very anxious to hear the defense.
I think the prosecution, the legal team, presented a very strong case. They were able to give very detailed information on what actually happened on Ahmaud on the day that he was murdered. It's now time to hear what the defense has, and I'm very eager, very anxious to see what they have as a defense, because clearly Ahmaud was murdered for no apparent reason.
And we heard from the defense today. I want to welcome our panel of legal experts, starting with BNC Chief Legal Correspondent Laura McNeal. Also joining us, attorneys Marie Pereira and as well as William Wagstaff. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. So, Laura, we heard from the defense, Attorney Goff, presenting his opening statement. What stood out to you?
I think what stood out the most to me is he did what was expected, which was victim blaming, shifting the focus from Rhodey Bryant to Ahmaud Arbery's actions that day, saying things such as, why didn't Ahmaud Arbery hide behind a tree, hide behind a mailbox? Why didn't he ask for help? And I think the jury is going to see through that, because if you are running literally for your life from two men that are carrying armed weapons, that are carrying a gun, you're not going to hide behind a tree or a mailbox. And so that was disappointing in terms, I thought the defense could have done a lot better, to be quite honest. And then trying to paint Bryant as this model citizen, referencing his home looked like something, he said, quote, out of a Norman Rothwell painting. So not off to the best start, but we'll see how things unfold.
Yeah, I mean, at times you wonder who the victim is. I remember earlier on in this case, in this trial, better yet, the defense arguing how many times you can actually reference Ahmaud Arbery as the victim. Marie, what's your take on that?
I think that opening statement was a poor display of legal strategy. I think he's desperate. It shows from the frivolous motions he's made. And for him to victim shame and actually say, why didn't Mr. Arbery call 911? Why didn't he find a way out? Victim shaming, I think that was poor strategy on his end, because I think even with where we are in the Deep South, it shows that he's arrogant, he's entitled, and he's in a community where he believes that he can make these types of arguments and appeal to the jurors. But I feel he made a wrong call, and the jurors are going to see right through it.
All right, William.
I think that the thing that stuck out to me the most was the only thing that I think that the defense attorney probably did well, is that he used, to me, which was a little bit of judo. The fact that he was recording and was so willing to provide this information to the cops, I think underscores his arrogance and his white supremacist attitude, that it was okay for him to hop in his truck, follow these friends, neighbors, or other white men to chase down and murder this black man, and there were going to be no consequences. I don't think in the moment he really appreciated the significance legally of handing over that evidence, and he flipped it in his opening to try to say, well, this guy was not a criminal. He clearly didn't do anything wrong. Why would he have recorded it? Why would he have been so transparent with the police that were investigating it? And the real answer is he was arrogant, and he's a white supremacist and felt that there was nothing wrong with it. It wasn't because he was innocent.
And it's also worth noting that Ahmaud Arbery had no weapon on him. Laura, prosecutors called 23 witnesses during the 8 days of testimony, which was yesterday, made the 8th day, today's the 9th. In your opinion, who had the most compelling testimony?
You know, I would definitely say the Georgia Bureau of Investigations agent, when he actually pulled out the gun that was used to kill Ahmaud Arbery, you could hear this lull in the courtroom. It was a surreal moment, as I like to describe it, because it really augmented just how brutal this shooting was, and him displaying actually just how close he was in shooting him. I know there's some debate about whether it was within inches or 3 feet, But obviously that was definitely a moment, I think, that really resonated with the jury. And then, of course, those very horrific crime photos that were shared as well.
Marie, who had the most compelling testimony for you?
For me, as a healthcare professional, I'm also a nurse. I think the coroner had the most compelling testimony from the photographs and the way he detailed the injuries. He detailed that Ahmaud had a gunshot to his wrist and it penetrated his radial artery and it was gushing out blood. And as a result of that gunshot and other gunshots to his chest that went right through his body, it fractured his ribs, it shattered his arteries. There was pooling of blood in his chest cavity, and he actually developed a condition called Erb's palsy, where the gunshot that went through his axilla under his arm resulted in his arm disconnecting almost from his body and making his left arm longer than the right arm. That's why the prosecutor asked what was the length of his arms, because at the beginning of the struggle, he was shot, and literally from below his elbow to his hand, he lost all feeling and ability to move. So he was really only fighting with one hand. And it was, to me, shocking, even as a nurse and an attorney who's seen pictures like that. I think that testimony shows the brutality that he endured. I think him explaining the fight or flight mechanism and explaining the alarm, the resistance, the exhaustion from that mechanism really had to touch the jurors. It had to. That was, to me, the most compelling testimony.
And we still saw in that video, he was still trying to defend himself until he went down to the ground and you could see the blood soaking through his white t-shirt. I thought it was asinine for the defense to ask the medical examiner, Dr. Donahue, if he feared for his life. And then the medical examiner, Dr. Donahue's response was, well, he had a shotgun pointed at him and he also had men chasing him in pickup trucks. William, what was most compelling for you?
I would tend to agree that it was the medical examiner's testimony that I think worked the best. One of the things you learn in law school is primacy and recency. And the fact that they saved the medical examiner to the end when they were closing out their prosecution, especially with the graphic nature of his testimony, with the photos, all of the science, I think that that was extremely powerful. Keeping in mind that they were trying to put forth this self-defense as their theory of the case, the medicine and the science really undercut that argument. So I think making sure that that was the last thing that the jury was going to hear towards the end of the prosecution's case, as well as zeroing in on how they're trying to sell this narrative that they were defending themselves, but the injuries that Mr. Arbery sustained and the pictures and the science don't support that.
Yeah. Laura, what do you think the state did well, and what do you think they could have done better?
I think the state did a great job in establishing, again, that Ahmaud Arbery didn't pose at any point in time a threat to Travis or Greg McMichaels or Rhodey Bryant, and establishing that he was not committing a crime. There's nothing in the evidence to support that he was in the process of creating a crime, or on the other occasions in the video where he's checking out this construction site or home under construction. He wasn't posing a threat to anyone. So I thought the state did a wonderful job in establishing that. What I would have liked to see them do better is really establishing the fact that Ahmaud Arbery really didn't have a chance, meaning one thing the medical examiner said is that he was in fight or flight mode, meaning his only option at that point was to fight. And I thought that it would have been helpful if the state could have brought in some more medical experts to talk about Ahmaud Arbery's last moments. I think it would have really resonated with the jurors.
Yeah, he also said that there was nothing that anyone could have done to save him. As we all remember in the beginning of this trial, the first officer on the scene testified that he did not render aid to Ahmaud, who lay dying in the middle of the street because he was trying to secure the scene. Marie, what do you think the prosecution did well? What could they have done better with?
I agree with Laura in the sense that I think they could have expanded on the conversation regarding the flight mechanism, because I think the prosecution should have brought experts in to explain that you could be dying and still be fighting. That just because he was fighting didn't mean that he wasn't injured. You can actually be dying and moments before death have superhuman strength. That is the flight or fight mechanism. And I agree with Laura that they could have expanded on that, but overall, they did an excellent job. I think they tore apart the defense's theory of the case from the beginning to end. And I think we are going to get a conviction in this case.
All right, we still got some time before we get there, though, Marie. Marie, can you explain that fight or flight? What kicks in when you're in the middle of something like that? How does your body react?
Your body reacts by trying to get out of the dangerous situation. First, there's an alarm, and the alarm causes certain hormones to be secreted by your body, epinephrine, adrenaline, and that causes your body to react in a way to go into defense mode. You want to resist the fear of the injury, and you run from it. You run for your life, and your heart rate accelerates, your brain cells accelerate, all your senses are heightened, and you're literally fighting for your life while you're in flight from the perceived risk of injury.
Could that also cause him to lose more blood at rapid speed?
Absolutely. Absolutely. His heart was still pumping, which accelerated the loss of blood from the gaping holes in his body. He was losing blood. The blood was pouring into his chest cavity. That's why the coroner said at that point he had so many holes in him and he was bleeding so much that there was nothing anyone could do for him, even though his heart was still beating and he was still fighting for his life.
And he was shot 3 times with a shotgun. William,
Absolutely.
William, how tough did the prosecution make it for the defense?
I think they put them in a position where, as it was said earlier, that they're desperate. And you're seeing the desperation even in the way that they delivered the opening statement. To me, that opening statement was more of a closing. And I was interested to see that they didn't object, and they gave him a lot of latitude to try to editorialize a lot. Normally, what you're doing in your opening is giving the jury a roadmap, and you're just letting them know what you expect that the evidence is going to show. Now, granted that there were things that were pre-marked, there were things that had already been agreed upon that were admitted into evidence, but the way he started off talking about, look at him working in his house, he wasn't bothering anybody, it, for me, was an indication that the punch from the prosecution was so strong that it left the defense a bit flailing. They still continue to keep revisiting this issue about who's in the courtroom, which I don't understand even strategically why they keep doing it. All they're doing is antagonizing the judge, and I give the judge a lot of credit that he has great judicial temperament, because he's probably very frustrated with it, but he doesn't visibly show that he's frustrated or angry. He allows them to speak. He gives them the opportunity to make their application. And then consistently with his previous ruling says, no, I'm going to deny that. But I think that there are a bunch of things that the defense is doing that highlight how badly it's going based on how well the prosecution has done so far.
Laura, do you think the judge will hold Attorney Goff in contempt? Because, I mean, he keeps filing these motions to try to get these black pastors out of the courtroom when the judge has already said, I'm not doing it.
Yes, although it is annoying for him to continue to make that second motion on something the judge has already ruled on, that's not enough for the judge to rule him in contempt. And so I think it's important that the judge in this case, he's being very even-keeled, very consistent in his rationale in terms of the jurors currently having more than enough protections from potential outside influences. And I love that the judge reminded Attorney Goff that they'd already vetted the jurors, meaning they made sure jurors were aware, yes, they might acknowledge they know what Black Lives Matters movement is or might be familiar with other movements, but each juror that sits on that panel made an oath essentially that they were able to be fair and impartial, and the judge says we have to take their word, and if that changes, the jurors will let me know.
All right, I want to thank you all for your legal perspective. Great conversation. I look forward to welcoming you all back.